I had several of you guys reach out to me yesterday, either on Twitter or in the comments section of the video, asking for the link to the channel on Rumble. I included it in the description below of this video. I'm still trying to figure out how to use Rumble myself. When I look internally, the channel name on Rumble is Behind the Line, but for some reason, the username is KCBTL84. I can't figure out why. So if you search Behind the Line on Rumble, it just doesn't come up. So the link is in the description below, along with the link to Patreon. If you think we add value here on the channel and you want to support the channel financially, head on over to Patreon and sign up. The numbers on Rumble continue to grow, so I appreciate all of you guys who found the channel on there and continue to support it. And I do have a little bit more good news before we get into the Olympics. It seems that I am finally out of what I call YouTube jail. For 3 or 4 months now, the majority of my videos have had to be human reviewed by YouTube. I was notified Friday afternoon that YouTube is going to allow me to start governing myself again when it comes to judging whether or not my content is advertiser friendly. Now, I cannot tell you how much of a relief that is. I put a lot of time, I put a lot of research into these videos. It is incredibly frustrating. When I look at my January numbers here on YouTube, I see the growth across every metric except revenue. I lost around $1,000 in January because I was uploading videos without ads, waiting for someone at YouTube to approve the video for ads. But it looks like I've made it through that storm. My past several videos, especially the ones over the weekend, they have been automatically approved with no problem. So, looks like we have made it through. All right. Enough of that bullshit. Let's jump right into the Olympics. What a disaster this has been for NBC this weekend. You could not dream up more of a nightmare scenario for NBC. Typically, the Winter Olympics, they don't draw the same audience as the Summer Olympics do. Now, even with that being the case, the Winter Games still bring in huge numbers for NBC. The opening ceremony in 2018, they were held in South Korea that year. NBC pulled in 28.3 million viewers. Now, outside of the NFL, nothing on television draws an audience that size. Going into Beijing, NBC actually warned advertisers that ratings could possibly be low. During the Summer Olympics last year in Tokyo, the network, they had to give advertisers make goods. I think it's called make goods. I could have the terminology wrong. What I'm trying to say, NBC had to give away free advertising time on other programming to make up for the lack of an audience for the Olympics. When networks sell ad time, they guarantee a certain size audience to advertisers. For example, if NBC sells ad time for $1 million for a 30-second slot at the Olympics, and they guarantee advertisers 20 million people will see it. If only 13 million people see the ad, NBC has to compensate the advertiser for that. NBC, it seems like they learned from their mistakes last summer. They warned advertisers ahead of time that ratings for the Winter Olympics are going to be low. But I don't think they thought it was going to be this low. This is a complete disaster for NBC and the IOC. Olympic coverage started Thursday night with Mike Tirico. NBC, they tried to mitigate some of the damage by having Mike Tirico pretty much blast China for their human rights violations, their ridiculous COVID restrictions. Olympic athletes are being forced into what the CCP and the mainstream media is calling isolation centers. That is a fancy word for a COVID camp. Camp COVID. Due to the dangers of the COVID, the Chinese government is restricting attendance at Olympic events. Figure skating the other night, which is an event that is heavily reliant on crowd reaction, they only allowed 800 people inside the arena. It was deadly silent. It was the equivalent of seeing a WNBA game on television, empty seats everywhere. The start of Olympic coverage Thursday night on NBC drew 7.7 million people. You know you're in deep shit when you're drawing 3 million people less than the NBA Finals. Back in 2018, NBC drew 16 million. 2014, 20 million. If this doesn't send shockwaves through the offices of NBC and the IOC, I don't know what will. In the span of 4 years, you lose over 8 million people in your audience? Perhaps everyone went to bed early Thursday night so they could wake up early Friday morning and watch the opening ceremony. After all, Savannah Guthrie was one of the leading voices calling the opening ceremony. America just loves Savannah Guthrie. People stop what they're doing to hear her opinion, and oh, what an opinion it was. As she used the opening ceremony to push propaganda and tell us how China isn't really abusing Uyghur Muslims. No, don't listen to that bullshit, America. Just look out there. A Uyghur Muslim is lighting the torch. You see them smiling. They're just, oh, so happy. This is the first time they have been out of a labor camp in years. Oh, oops. Disregard that last statement. America is bad, China is good. The opening ceremony Friday morning drew 14 million viewers. Now, with streaming numbers included, the total audience was 16 million. It was a record low for NBC in the Olympics, down 43% from 2018. 2018, like I said, over 28 million people tuned into the opening ceremony. NBC lost half their audience on linear television in 4 years. Now, I've seen a lot of excuses being made by the media as to why Americans are ignoring the Olympics. Now, to the media's credit, they do mention the human rights violations in China as one of the leading causes. But some of these other excuses they're just shit. Some outlets are claiming Olympic fatigue. They claimed the same shit last summer in Tokyo. Now, how in the hell could there have been Olympic fatigue last summer? The games were postponed a full year. If anything, Americans should have been clamoring for the Olympics. Of course, they weren't, because the Tokyo Olympics were a giant social justice orgy, led by none other than Megan Rapinoe, the female Colin Kaepernick. For the Winter Olympics, the media is claiming Olympic fatigue because the Summer Olympics were just, about 6 months ago, instead of the traditional 2-year gap. The NFL has a 7, maybe 8 month gap between the Super Bowl and the start of the regular season. Do you ever hear talk of NFL fatigue? When week 1 of the regular season gets here in September, people are clamoring for football. Olympic fatigue is bullshit. People aren't not watching the Olympics because of fatigue. They're not watching because they're not interested. Another excuse I see is the time difference. There's a 14-hour time difference. That's why people aren't watching. South Korea had a 15-hour time difference. That didn't seem to stop 28 million from watching in 2018. For the most part, there's always a major time difference from where the Olympics are being held and the time zones here in America. The difference in time is irrelevant. What makes matters worse for NBC is where they are seeing ratings drop demographically. Advertisers covet the 18 to 34, 18 to 49 demo. NBC is down 68% in the 18 to 49 demo, 73% in 18 to 34 when compared to 2018. Like I said, the backlash for having the Olympics in China is part of the reason that we're seeing record low ratings. But the real reason? The IOC has allowed the Olympics to become too political. When I was growing up, people looked forward to the Olympics because it was a unifying event. It didn't matter what you believed politically. The anti-abortion Christian could relate to the pro-choice feminist. They put their differences aside because they could both relate to being American and pulling for their country. What happens when you add the element of politics, and this is not just in sports, this is in anything. You add the element of politics, it creates an atmosphere where you force your audience to choose sides politically instead of athletically. The Tokyo Olympics last summer, prime example. We saw people here in America actively cheering against their own country because they didn't like the athletes representing them. People celebrated when the women's soccer team lost. People celebrated when Gwen Berry finished dead last. People covered the eyes of children when Raven Saunders was on television. There was no Michael Phelps. There was no gymnastics team like 96 in Atlanta. There wasn't anyone for Americans to get behind. It's the same story in Beijing. Before the Winter Olympics even started, this shit had been so tarnished with politics, people just aren't interested. I think most are sick of the bullshit. In short, the Olympics just aren't fun anymore. This is a dying brand. There is so much negativity attached. When you think of the Olympics, the first 5 thoughts that come to your mind, all negative. The IOC, they don't seem to have any answers either. NBC damn sure doesn't have any answers. They're too afraid of offending China. Mike Tirico calls out China Thursday night. The very next morning, Savannah Guthrie is singing their praises from her comfortable studio 5,000 miles away. Ratings for the Olympics, they tend to increase after the opening ceremony as the competition gets going. But they have a major problem this year, the Super Bowl. This week, all anyone will be talking about is the Super Bowl. NBC averaged 15.5 million last summer in Tokyo. I think that number will be significantly less for the Winter Olympics. The politics, the competition from the NFL, the fact the Winter Olympics are usually watched by less people, there is no doubt we are going to continue to see record low ratings. But let me know what you guys think. Are the Olympics a dying brand? Will NBC see record low ratings for the COVID Olympics? Sound off in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe. Click the notification bell to receive all notifications from the channel. The best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, KC_BTL84 on Twitter. I might see you guys later this afternoon. If not, I will see you tomorrow.